Cole Rourke had sworn never to let another child's eyes haunt him. But on Christmas morning, 1884, as Wyoming's blizzard clawed his face raw, two tiny hands locked onto his boot stirrup with desperate strength. He looked down. Two little girls, maybe 6 and 8, stood in knee-deep snow, their lips blue, their dresses thin as paper. The older one whispered through chattering teeth, "Please, mister, just be our dad today, just today." Cole's chest went tight. He'd buried that word with his own son 3 years ago. He should ride on. He should keep running, but the way those girls were shaking, not from cold, but from courage, stopped him dead. Have you ever made a choice that changed everything? Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The wind screamed across the open prairie like a living thing bent on murder. Cole Rourke hunched deeper into his coat, ice crystals forming in his beard, his horse's breath coming in white plumes that vanished into the howling white. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, running from memories that clung tighter than any bounty hunter. Christmas meant nothing to him anymore. It was just another day to survive, another stretch of frozen earth between him and wherever the hell he was going. His gelding stumbled slightly, and Cole straightened in the saddle, scanning the landscape. Nothing but white. White sky, white ground, no horizon to speak of, just the kind of storm that swallowed men whole and spat out their bones come spring. He was a fool for being out here. But then again, he'd been a fool for a long time. That's when he felt it. The tug on his left stirrup. Cole's hand went to his Colt before his brain caught up. He looked down, expecting a wolf or maybe a desperate thief. What he saw froze him colder than the blizzard. 2 little girls stood in snow up to their knees. Their dresses were cotton, summer cotton, soaked through and clinging to stick-thin frames. No coats, no gloves. The older one, maybe 8, had her small hands wrapped around his stirrup leather with a grip that said she'd hold on until her fingers broke. The younger one, perhaps 6, stood just behind her sister, one hand clutching the older girl's dress, the other pressed to her mouth as if holding back sobs. Their faces were wind-burned red, their lips tinged blue. But it was their eyes that hit Cole like a bullet to the chest. They weren't crying. They were beyond that. They just stared up at him with the kind of hope that had no business existing in eyes that young and that afraid. "Please," the older girl said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Please, mister, just be our dad today." Cole's throat closed up. His hand fell away from his gun. "Just today," the girl continued, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely form words. "Mama said we can't ask strangers, but you look like you might not hurt us." The younger girl nodded, her whole body trembling. "We've been waiting," she whispered, "waiting for someone good." Cole sat there, snow piling on his shoulders, staring down at these 2 half-frozen children who had no business being outside in weather that was killing cattle by the hundreds. Every instinct screamed at him to ask where their mother was, why they were alone, what kind of hell had brought them to this moment. But the rawness in their faces told him they didn't have time for his questions. "Where?" he managed. The older girl pointed with a shaking hand. Through the sheets of white, Cole could barely make out a dark shape. A cabin, maybe 200 yards off, smoke rising thin and desperate from a chimney. "Mama's sick," the older girl said. "Real sick. She said don't bring strangers. But you," her voice cracked, "you got kind eyes, mister, like my papa had. Before." Before. That one word carried a weight Cole knew too well. He should keep riding. He'd spent 3 years making sure he didn't get close to anyone, especially children. He'd failed his own son, failed him in the worst way a father could. He had no business being anyone's anything, even for a day, even for an hour. But these girls were dying. Right here, right now, they were dying in front of him. Cole swung down from his horse, his boots sinking deep into the snow. He shrugged out of his heavy coat, the only thing between him and the cold, and wrapped it around both girls at once. They disappeared into the leather and wool, their faces peeking out like baby birds in a nest. "Inside," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Now." The older girl looked up at him, and something like wonder crossed her face. "You're really coming?" "I'm really coming." She grabbed his hand, Her fingers were like ice, and the younger girl took his other hand, and together they trudged through the snow toward that cabin. Cole led his horse behind them, his body already aching from the cold without his coat, but he kept moving. The wind pushed against them like a wall, but the girls held his hands tighter, and somehow that made each step possible. As they got closer, Cole could see the cabin was small, maybe 2 rooms, with walls that looked like they were held together by prayer and stubbornness. The wood was weathered gray, gaps visible between some of the boards, the whole structure leaning slightly to the left, as if the wind had been working on it for years. But smoke rose from the chimney, and that meant fire, and fire meant life. The older girl pushed the door open, and warmth hit Cole's face like a blessing. "Mama," she called out, her voice stronger now that they were inside. "Mama, we brought help." The cabin's interior was dim, lit only by firelight and a single lantern. Cole's eyes adjusted slowly. A rough wooden table, 2 chairs, a small stove in the corner with a pot steaming on top. Blankets hung over the gaps in the walls, trying to keep the cold out. And in a narrow bed pushed against the far wall, a woman sat up fast, her face pale as milk except for the fever flush on her cheeks. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair falling loose around her shoulders and eyes that went from confused to terrified in the space of a heartbeat. "Maggie," she said, her voice hoarse and sharp. "What did you do?" The older girl, Maggie, straightened her shoulders. "You're sick, Mama, real sick. And it's Christmas. And I prayed real hard, and then this man came." The woman's eyes fixed on Cole, and he saw her hand move under the blanket. When it came out, she was holding a small pistol, the kind you could hide in a boot or a handbag. Her hand shook, but the barrel stayed pointed at his chest. "Get out," she said. "Get out of my house." Cole raised his hands slowly, keeping them visible. "Ma'am, I mean no harm. Your daughters, I don't care what my daughters said or did." Her voice was getting stronger, fueled by fear and fury. "I don't know you. You could be anyone. You could be one of—" She stopped, her jaw clenching. "Just leave, please." Cole stayed very still. He understood her terror. He'd seen enough of the world to know what happened to women alone, especially women with children and no man to protect them. But he'd also seen the blue tinge on those girls' lips. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'll leave if you want." But those girls were outside in the storm, waiting for someone. And I don't think they were doing that for fun. The woman's face crumpled slightly, and she looked at Maggie and the younger girl, who had to be Nora. "You went outside. I told you to stay in. I told you. You got the shaking sickness again, Mama," Maggie said, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "And we're almost out of wood. And Nora was so hungry her stomach stopped making noise. I thought maybe God would send someone. Papa used to say God sends people when you need them most." Tears streaked down the woman's face, but the gun didn't lower. "Your papa was wrong about a lot of things." Cole watched this exchange, his heart hammering. He could see the fever in the woman's eyes, the way she swayed, even sitting up. He could see the empty pot on the table, the bare shelves. He could see, in the corner by the stove, a pile of wood that wouldn't last another day. "My name is Cole Rourke," he said, keeping his voice level. "I was a deputy marshal in Colorado 3 years back. I'm not anymore. And I'm not anything else threatening either. I'm just a man who was riding through a storm and found your daughters freezing to death. If you want me gone, I'll go. But let me bring in wood first, and water, and whatever supplies I've got in my saddlebags that might help." The woman stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Whatever she saw there made something shift. "Evelyn," she said finally. "Evelyn Hart. And if you try anything, I'll put a bullet in you, lawman or not." "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn lowered the gun slightly, though she kept it in her lap. "Maggie, Nora, come here." The girls moved to their mother's bedside, and Cole saw how Evelyn ran her hands over them, checking for injury, her face tight with worry and love and desperation. When she was satisfied they were unhurt, she looked back at Cole. "There's an axe by the back door," she said. "Woodpile's covered with snow, but you'll find it. Water pumps out back too if it hasn't frozen solid." Cole nodded. "I'll get to it." "And Mr. Rourke?" Evelyn's eyes were hard. Don't think I won't be watching that door. Wouldn't expect otherwise. Cole stepped back outside into the storm, and the cold hit him like a fist now that he didn't have his coat. He found the axe exactly where Evelyn said, rusty but solid, and made his way around the cabin to what passed for a woodpile. It was buried under 2 feet of snow, but he dug until he found the logs underneath. They were already split, which told him someone had been preparing, trying to make things last. But there weren't many left. He carried in as much as he could manage, his arms aching, and stacked it by the stove. Evelyn watched him from the bed, the gun never far from her hand, while Maggie and Nora huddled under a blanket nearby. He made 3 more trips, until the woodpile inside was respectable and the cold had worked its way so deep into his bones his hands were clumsy. The water pump took longer. It was half frozen, but he got it working and hauled in 2 buckets. Then he went to his horse, unsaddled the gelding, and brought the animal into what passed for a lean-to attached to the cabin. It wasn't much shelter, but it was better than the open storm. By the time Cole came back inside, stamping snow off his boots, he could barely feel his fingers. Maggie had added wood to the stove, and the heat was building. Nora was setting the table with mismatched tin plates, her movements careful and precise. "You look like a frozen ghost," Evelyn said. She still held the gun, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "Sit by the fire before you die of stupidity." Cole almost smiled. "Yes, ma'am." He pulled one of the chairs close to the stove and sat, letting the heat work on his frozen hands. The pain of thawing was sharp and immediate, but he'd felt worse. Evelyn was watching him with those fever-bright eyes, and he could see her making calculations, trying to figure out who he really was and what he wanted. "Maggie said you look like her papa," Evelyn said after a moment. "You don't. James was fair-haired and soft-spoken, but she's young. She sees what she needs to see." "Most of us do," Cole said quietly. "Where were you headed before my daughter stopped you?" "Nowhere in particular." "That's a lie. Everyone's headed somewhere." Cole met her gaze. "I'm headed away. That's the truth of it." Evelyn's expression shifted, something like recognition flickering across her face. "Away from what?" "Things I can't fix." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire popped and crackled. Outside, the storm howled. Finally, Evelyn lowered the gun completely and set it on the table beside the bed. "There's coffee," she said. "Old and bitter, but it's hot. Maggie, pour Mr. Rourke some coffee." Maggie moved quickly, pouring dark liquid into a chipped mug and bringing it to Cole with both hands, solemn as a priestess. "Mama says always give travelers coffee. It's only right." "Your mama's correct." Cole took the mug, and the warmth in his hands felt like salvation. He sipped. It was indeed bitter, but it was also the best thing he'd tasted in days. Nora had climbed onto the bed beside her mother, curling into Evelyn's side like a kitten seeking warmth. Evelyn stroked her daughter's hair absently, her eyes never leaving Cole. "You said you were a deputy marshal," Evelyn said. "Why'd you stop?" "I stopped being good at it." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Evelyn's mouth tightened, but she didn't push. Instead, she glanced at the window where snow was piling against the glass. "Storm's getting worse. You won't make it 5 miles in this. You can sleep in the barn. There's hay and some old blankets out there." "The barn's half collapsed, Mama," Maggie said quietly. "The wind took part of the roof last week." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, and Cole saw the exhaustion in every line of her face. "Then the floor," she said. "By the stove, but I'm keeping the gun close, Mr. Rourke." "Fair enough." The evening settled into something that felt almost like peace. Cole sat by the fire, warming himself and drying his clothes. Maggie found some hard biscuits in a tin and distributed them with grave ceremony, half a biscuit each, because that's what they had. Cole tried to refuse his portion, but Evelyn's look told him it would be an insult, so he ate slowly, making it last. Nora fell asleep first, still curled against her mother. Maggie lasted longer, her eyes drooping as she sat near Cole, close enough to touch, but not quite touching, as if she was testing whether he'd stay solid or vanish like smoke. "Maggie," Evelyn called softly. "Bed." "But Mama—" "Bed. Now!" Maggie obeyed, crawling into the small space beside her mother and sister. The bed was built for two at most, but somehow all three of them fit, tangled together like they'd been doing this a long time. Evelyn pulled the blanket up around her daughters, then looked at Cole. "Why'd you really stop?" Cole stared into the fire. He could lie. He was good at lying now. But something about this woman, this fierce, frightened woman holding a gun and two children, made him want to tell the truth. "I had a son," he said quietly. "Thomas. He was 7. There was a raid, gang out of Missouri, bad men doing bad things. I went after them. I was so sure I could stop them, bring them in, make things right." He paused, the old pain rising like bile. "I was gone 3 weeks. When I came back, cholera had torn through the town. My wife, my boy, they were both gone." Evelyn's face softened. "That wasn't your fault. I wasn't there. You couldn't have stopped cholera. I could have been there when they died. I could have held them. I could have—" His voice broke, and he stopped, swallowing hard. "I was out chasing bad men to make myself feel important. And while I was gone, the only people who mattered died without me." The silence stretched long. The fire crackled. The storm raged. "James, my husband, died 6 months ago," Evelyn said finally. "Accident at the mill. Crushed his chest. He lived 3 days after, but he couldn't breathe right. He drowned in his own blood, basically. I held his hand the whole time, and it didn't matter. He still died." Cole looked at her. "I'm sorry. Me too." Evelyn's hand stroked Nora's hair gently. "Being there doesn't fix it, but not being there, that's worse. I understand why you left the badge. I didn't just leave the badge. I left everything. And now you're running." "Yes." "From what?" "From the part of me that failed them." Evelyn considered this, her fever-bright eyes sad. "You can't outrun yourself, Mr. Rourke. I've tried. Doesn't work." Cole had no answer to that, so he just nodded and looked back at the fire. After a while, he heard Evelyn's breathing change, slower, deeper, and knew she'd fallen asleep. The gun lay on the table beside her, within reach, but not in her hand. She was trusting him, just a little, just enough. He should leave come morning. First light, he'd saddle his horse and ride on, let these people get back to whatever life they were building. But as he sat there in the warm glow of the stove, listening to the soft breathing of 3 people who'd let him in from the cold, Cole felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. He felt needed, and God help him, he didn't want to leave. The storm raged all through the night. Cole dozed fitfully by the stove, his back against the wall, his gun within reach more from habit than fear. Every hour or so he'd wake and add wood to the fire, keeping the heat steady. Once, near dawn, he heard Evelyn coughing, deep, rattling coughs that shook her whole frame. He stood, uncertain, but Maggie was already awake, pressing a cup of water to her mother's lips, murmuring soft reassurances. When Evelyn settled again, Maggie looked at Cole across the dim room. Her eyes were old beyond her years. "She's been sick a week," Maggie whispered. "It keeps coming back. Every time we think she's better, it comes back." "She needs medicine," Cole said quietly. "A doctor. Town's 8 miles south. Doctor's there, but—" Maggie's face went tight. "We can't go to town." "Why not?" Maggie glanced at her sleeping mother, then at Nora, then back at Cole. Whatever she was deciding, it was heavy. Finally, she stood and crept across the room to where Cole sat. She knelt beside him, her small face serious. "There's a man," she whispered. "Mr. Drayton. He's the banker. After Papa died, Mama went to get the money Papa had saved, for the winter, for the planting come spring. But Mr. Drayton said there was no money. He said Papa owed debts, big debts. He took everything." Cole's jaw tightened. "Everything?" "Everything. And then he said he owned the farm now, because of the debts. He said we could stay through winter, but come New Year's we have to leave. He's got papers, official papers. Mama says they're lies, but she can't prove it. And Mr. Drayton, he says if Mama makes trouble, he'll take me and Nora, put us in a home, says Mama's not fit to raise us alone." Cold fury settled into Cole's chest. the kind of cold that had nothing to do with the storm outside. He threatened to take you? Maggie nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Mama's scared. That's why we can't go to town. That's why she's so afraid of strangers. She thinks everyone's working for Mr. Drayton. She looked up at Cole, and the hope in her face was almost unbearable. But you're not, are you? You're not one of his men? No, Cole said, his voice hard. I'm not one of his men. Will you? Maggie's voice wavered. Will you help us? Please. Just until Mama's better, just until we can figure out what to do. Cole looked at this child, this brave, terrified child, and felt the last of his defenses crumble. He'd spent 3 years running from responsibility, from connection, from the possibility of failing someone again. But here, in this freezing cabin with a dying fire and a sick woman and 2 little girls who'd begged him to be their father for just one day, here he couldn't run. I'll help, he said quietly. I'll stay. Maggie's face transformed. She threw her arms around his neck, hugging him with fierce strength, and Cole felt something crack open inside his chest, something he'd kept locked and frozen for so long he'd forgotten it was there. Thank you, Maggie whispered against his shoulder. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Cole patted her back awkwardly, his throat tight. Go back to bed. Get some sleep. Morning's coming. Maggie pulled back, wiped her eyes, and crept back to the bed. Cole sat alone again by the fire, staring into the flames. He'd just made a promise to help, a promise to stay. And for the first time in 3 years, the weight of a promise didn't feel like a chain. It felt like purpose. Outside, the storm began to ease. The wind's howl dropped to a steady moan. Snow still fell, but softer now, gentler. Dawn was coming, pale and cold, and with it would come decisions. Hard decisions. Dangerous decisions. But Cole Rourke had stopped running, and whatever came next, whoever this Caleb Drayton was, whatever power he held, Cole would face it. Not because he was a hero, not because he was trying to redeem himself, but because 2 little girls had grabbed his stirrup in a blizzard and asked him to stay. And he'd said yes. The first light of morning came gray and reluctant, filtering through the gaps in the cabin walls like it wasn't sure it wanted to be there. Cole hadn't really slept, just dozed in that shallow way a man does when he's learned to keep one ear open for trouble. He'd added wood to the fire twice more since Maggie went back to bed, and now the cabin was warm enough that frost no longer formed on the inside of the windows. Evelyn woke with a start, her hand reaching for the gun before her eyes were fully open. When she saw Cole still sitting by the stove, exactly where he'd been all night, something in her face shifted. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. You stayed, she said, her voice rough with fever and sleep. Said I would. She pushed herself up to sitting, moving carefully like her bones hurt. The fever flush was still high on her cheeks, and when she coughed, it rattled deep in her chest. Cole frowned. That cough's getting worse. It'll pass. But even as she said it, another coughing fit took her, bending her double. Maggie woke instantly, scrambling to help her mother sit up straighter, rubbing her back in small circles. Nora stirred but didn't wake, her small face peaceful in sleep. When Evelyn finally caught her breath, she looked at Cole with exhausted eyes. What day is it? December 26th. So we have 5 days. Cole's frown deepened. 5 days until what? Evelyn and Maggie exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations that happen between mothers and daughters who'd learned to communicate in glances. Finally, Evelyn sighed. 5 days until Caleb Drayton comes to collect. The name landed in the room like a stone thrown into still water. Cole kept his face neutral, but his instincts, the ones he'd honed over 10 years wearing a badge, were already working, filing away information, building a picture. Maggie told me a little, Cole said carefully. About your husband's death. About the bank. Evelyn's expression hardened. Maggie shouldn't have... Mama, he needs to know, Maggie said, her voice stronger than it had been in the dark. He said he'd help, but he can't help if he doesn't know. Evelyn looked at her daughter for a long moment, then back at Cole. The calculation in her eyes was sharp despite the fever. Why would you help? You don't know us. You owe us nothing. Maybe I'm tired of owing nothing to nobody. It wasn't the answer Evelyn expected. She studied him, and Cole let her look. Whatever she saw made her decide something, because she nodded slowly and reached for the cup of water Maggie held out to her. James, my husband, worked at the mill, Evelyn began, her voice carefully measured. But he was good with numbers. He kept books for some of the other farmers, helped them figure their accounts. He saved everything we could spare. We were going to buy more land, maybe build a real house instead of this. She gestured at the cabin walls. He kept our savings in the bank, Drayton's bank. It's the only one in town. Cole nodded, already seeing where this was headed. When James died, I waited a month. Let myself grieve. Let the girls grieve. Then I went to the bank to withdraw our money. We needed it to survive the winter, to hire help for the spring planting. Evelyn's hands tightened around the cup. Drayton looked at me like I was something stuck to his boot. He said there was no money, said James had taken out loans, big loans, for equipment we never bought, for livestock we never owned. He had papers, all signed in James's hand. Were they real? Cole asked. The signatures? I don't know. Evelyn's voice cracked. I don't know. James never told me about loans, but the signatures looked right, and Drayton had witnesses, men who said they saw James sign the papers. What was I supposed to do? I'm a woman, a widow. The law doesn't... She stopped, swallowing hard. The law doesn't care what I think. Cole's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before, in a dozen small towns across the frontier. Women left alone, vulnerable, their property and their lives suddenly subject to the whims of men who saw opportunity in tragedy. So he took the money, Cole said. He took everything. The money, the livestock, the equipment. And then he said the debts were so high that the farm itself was forfeit. He owns it now, according to the law, but he said we could stay through the winter. Evelyn's laugh was bitter as ashes. Generous of him, wasn't it, letting us freeze slowly instead of quickly? And New Year's? New Year's Day, he's bringing the sheriff and some men. They'll remove us from the property. Drayton's already got buyers lined up. There's good water here, good grazing, and underneath... She paused, and something flickered in her eyes. Fear. Or maybe knowledge she wished she didn't have. Underneath what? Cole pressed. Evelyn looked at Maggie again, and this time Maggie nodded. The girl slipped off the bed and went to the fireplace. She knelt down and pressed her small fingers against one of the stones near the base. There was a soft click, and the stone shifted. Maggie pulled it free, revealing a hollow space behind it. From the hollow, she withdrew a leather satchel, worn and water-stained. She brought it to Cole like she was carrying something sacred and dangerous all at once. Papa told me about this, Maggie said quietly, the night before he died. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should show Mama. But Mama was so sad after, and then Mr. Drayton came, and I forgot. Until last week. Cole took the satchel. It was heavier than it looked. He glanced at Evelyn, who nodded permission, and then he opened it. Inside was a journal, bound in leather, the pages filled with neat, careful handwriting. Numbers, dates, names. Cole flipped through it slowly, his deputy marshal's instincts kicking in hard. This wasn't just a ledger. This was evidence. James kept records, Evelyn said softly, of everything, every transaction, every debt, every loan in this county for the past 5 years. He was quiet, my James. People trusted him. They told him things, and he wrote it all down. Cole's eyes moved faster across the pages. He saw it now, the pattern. Loans issued by Drayton's bank to farmers who could barely read. Interest rates that doubled or tripled without explanation. Foreclosures on property that was then sold to the same 3 or 4 men over and over again. A network of theft dressed up in legal paper and official seals. There's more, Maggie whispered. She reached into the satchel and pulled out a folded map, the edges torn and stained. She spread it on the floor in front of Cole. It was a map of the county, with property lines drawn in ink. But over the top of the official lines, someone, James presumably, had drawn new lines in red. And underneath certain properties, including the Hart farm, were notations in that same careful handwriting. Copper deposits, Cole read aloud. Estimated high yield. Papa found an old surveyor's report, Maggie said, from before the county was settled proper. There's copper under this land, under our land and under 3 of the other farms Drayton's taken. Enough copper to make a man rich. Cole looked up at Evelyn and saw the fear naked in her face now. Drayton knows, Evelyn said. James figured it out too late. The loans, the foreclosures. Drayton's been stealing land because he knows what's underneath. And if anyone finds out, if anyone questions how he got the properties, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. He'll kill to keep it quiet, Cole said flatly. He already has. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. 3 men have died in the past 2 years. Accidents, they said. A fall from a barn, a wagon that tipped over, a drowning in the river. But James knew them all. They were the ones who asked questions, who pushed back against Drayton, and they all died. Cole felt the old familiar burn in his gut, the one that used to come when he saw injustice, when he found evidence of crimes that needed answering. He'd walked away from that feeling 3 years ago, told himself it wasn't his problem anymore, that he wasn't the law and didn't want to be. But looking at Evelyn's fever-bright eyes, at Maggie's solemn face, at Nora still sleeping peacefully in the bed, he felt that burn kindle into something hotter. Your husband was going to expose him, Cole said. Evelyn nodded. I think so. I think that's why James had the accident. It wasn't an accident at all. The silence that followed was heavy. Outside, the snow had stopped and pale sunlight was trying to break through the clouds. It looked like a new day. It looked like hope. But inside this cabin, hope was a fragile thing being crushed under the weight of ugly truth. Cole closed the journal and looked at Evelyn. You need medicine, real medicine, from the doctor in town. I can't go to town. If Drayton sees me, he won't see you. He'll see me. Evelyn's eyes widened. You can't. If he thinks you're helping us, he already knows someone's helping you. You're still alive, still in this house. That means you've been holding on somehow. Cole stood, his decision made. I'll ride into town. I'll get the medicine. And I'll take a look at this Drayton, see what kind of man we're dealing with. He's dangerous, Evelyn said urgently. He's got men. The sheriff's in his pocket, half the town council too. You can't just... I'm not planning to just anything. I'm planning to get medicine for a sick woman and mind my own business. Cole's smile was thin and cold. I'm very good at minding my own business. Maggie looked up at him with wide eyes. You're really going to help us? For real? Cole knelt down so he was eye level with the girl. I'm really going to help you. For real. Will you come back? Nora's small voice made them all turn. She was awake now, sitting up in the bed, her hair a mess of tangles, her eyes still puffy from sleep. People who leave don't always come back. The words hit Cole like a physical blow. He saw his own son in Nora's face for a moment, that same worry, that same knowledge that the world could take people away and never give them back. I'll come back, Cole said, and he meant it. I promise. Nora studied him with the serious intensity only children possess, weighing his words against every broken promise she'd ever heard. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. Okay, but you have to take Mr. Bear. She scrambled off the bed and retrieved a small stuffed bear from beside the pillow, worn nearly bald from love, one eye missing, the stitching coming loose at the seams. She held it out to Cole. He keeps people safe. Papa gave him to me, and he kept me safe. So now he'll keep you safe. Cole's throat went tight. He took the bear carefully, like the precious thing it was. I'll guard him with my life. Nora smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her, and it was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Evelyn was watching all of this with tears tracking down her face, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. There's money, not much, but some, hidden in... Keep it, Cole said. You'll need it more than I will. But the medicine, I'll manage. He stood, tucking the journal and map back into the satchel. I'm taking these. If something happens to me, if I don't come back, you take this journal and you run. You take your girls and you go as far as you can and you find a federal marshal, not the local sheriff, a federal marshal. You show him this evidence. You understand? Evelyn's face went pale, but she nodded. Cole looked at Maggie. There's supplies in my saddlebags. Jerky, some flour, coffee. Use it. Keep the fire going. Don't let anyone in unless you know them. And if someone comes who isn't me, we hide, Maggie said, her voice firm. There's a root cellar out back. Mama showed us. We can hide there. Good girl. Cole pulled on his coat, still damp from yesterday, but warmer than nothing. He checked his Colt, made sure it was loaded, and tucked the satchel inside his coat. I'll be back before dark. You have my word. He headed for the door, but Evelyn's voice stopped him. Mr. Rourke? Cole? She waited until he turned around. Thank you for staying, for being what you are. I'm not anything special, ma'am. Yes, Evelyn said quietly, you are. You just forgot for a while. Cole had no answer to that, so he just tipped his head and walked out into the cold morning. His horse was in the lean-to, stamping and snorting, ready to move after a night of rest. Cole saddled him quickly, his hands working from muscle memory while his mind was already 3 moves ahead. He was riding into a trap. He knew that. A stranger showing up asking questions about a sick widow and her children? Drayton would hear about it within an hour. The smart play would be to grab the medicine and get out fast. But Cole had never been particularly smart about these things. He'd always been the kind of lawman who poked hornets' nests just to see what came buzzing out. The ride to town took 2 hours through snow that was knee-deep in places. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of white so bright it hurt to look at. The sun climbed higher, and the temperature rose just enough to make the top layer of snow wet and heavy. Cole's horse struggled in places, but the gelding was strong and stubborn, and they made steady progress. As he rode, Cole thought about the journal hidden inside his coat. Evidence like that could hang a man, if it reached the right people. But in a town where the banker owned the sheriff, evidence didn't mean much. Drayton would just burn the journal and bury anyone who'd seen it. No, if Cole was going to do this right, he needed more than evidence. He needed leverage. He needed something Drayton couldn't ignore or destroy. The town appeared ahead like a collection of dark shapes against the snow. Salvation, Wyoming, population maybe 300 on a good day. A main street with false front buildings, a church steeple rising at one end, and the usual assortment of homes spreading out in a rough grid. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys, and as Cole rode closer, he could hear the sounds of life returning after the storm, axes chopping wood, voices calling out, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Cole rode down the main street slowly, noting everything. The saloon, the Lucky Dollar, was doing steady business even at midday. The general store had its doors open, a woman sweeping snow off the steps. The bank sat in the middle of the street like a fat toad, 2 stories, brick instead of wood, with windows that caught the sunlight and threw it back hard. The doctor's office was at the far end of town, marked by a sign that swung in the breeze. Cole tied his horse to the rail and stepped inside, the warmth and the smell of carbolic acid hitting him at once. A man looked up from behind a desk, middle-aged, balding, with the kind of face that had seen too much suffering to be surprised by anything. Help you? I need medicine, Cole said, for fever and lung congestion, bad cough that won't quit. The doctor's eyes sharpened. Who's sick? A friend. Friend got a name? Cole met the doctor's gaze steadily. Do I need to provide a name to buy medicine? The doctor studied him for a long moment, then sighed and stood. No, I suppose you don't. But if your friend's the widow Hart, you should know she's not popular around here right now. Why's that? Because she's accused Caleb Drayton of fraud, and nobody accuses the man who owns half the town without making enemies. The doctor moved to a cabinet and began pulling out bottles. Willow bark tea for the fever, horehound syrup for the cough, and this, he held up a small brown bottle. Laudanum. Just a little, just enough to let her sleep and let her body heal. Too much, and she'll never wake up. You understand? I understand. The doctor wrapped the bottles carefully and tied them with string. That'll be $5. Cole pulled out the money, most of what he had left, and laid it on the desk. The doctor took it, counted it, and then looked up at Cole with tired eyes. You're new in town. Just passing through? That's what they all say. Then they get involved in something that's none of their business, and they end up in the ground. The doctor handed over the package. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Drayton's got reach, he's got power. and he's got no conscience to slow him down. Thanks for the advice. You won't take it, the doctor said, and it wasn't a question. Men like you never do. You've got that look, the look of someone who's seen things and can't walk away from more things. It'll get you killed. Maybe. Cole tucked the package inside his coat. But at least I'll die standing up. He left before the doctor could respond and walked back out into the street. The sun was high now, the snow melting in patches, turning the street to mud. Cole untied his horse but didn't mount. Instead, he turned and looked at the bank. A man stood in the window on the second floor, watching. He was tall, well-dressed, with silver hair and the kind of face that looked like it smiled a lot but never meant it. Their eyes met across the distance, and Cole felt the weight of that gaze, calculating, cold, already deciding what kind of threat Cole represented. Caleb Drayton. Had to be. Cole held the stare for 3 long seconds, letting Drayton see that he wasn't afraid, that he wasn't backing down. Then Cole mounted his horse and turned away, heading back up the street at an easy walk. Not running, not hiding. Just a man who'd gotten what he came for and was leaving. But he felt Drayton's eyes on his back the whole way, and he knew, with the certainty of a man who'd spent years hunting bad men, that he'd just painted a target on himself. The ride back seemed longer, even though the trail was easier now that he'd broken it once. Cole kept checking behind him, watching for followers, but no one came. That worried him more than if they had. It meant Drayton was thinking, planning, figuring out his next move instead of acting on impulse. It was late afternoon when Cole finally saw the cabin ahead, smoke rising thin and steady from the chimney. He felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, he realized. He'd been half afraid he'd come back to find the place burned, the family gone. Maggie must have been watching for him because the door opened before he reached it, and she came running out, her face bright with hope and fear mixed together. "You came back! You really came back!" "Said I would." Cole dismounted and pulled the medicine package from his coat. "How's your mama?" "Worse," Maggie said, and the brightness dimmed. "She's hot, real hot, and she's been saying things that don't make sense. Nora's scared." Cole's jaw tightened. He handed Maggie the reins. "Can you take care of my horse? Unsaddle him? Give him some of that grain in the saddlebag?" Maggie nodded, suddenly solemn with the responsibility. Cole went inside and found Evelyn thrashing in the bed, her face flushed dark with fever, her hair soaked with sweat. Nora sat beside her mother, holding her hand and crying silently. Cole knelt by the bed and touched Evelyn's forehead. She was burning up, dangerously hot. Her eyes opened, but they didn't focus. She looked right through him. "James," she whispered. "James, you have to tell them. You have to make them understand." "Easy," Cole said softly. He unpacked the medicine with steady hands, mixing the willow bark tea the way the doctor had instructed, adding a careful dose of laudanum to the horehound syrup. "Nora, I need you to help me sit your mama up." Together, they got Evelyn upright enough to drink. She fought at first, confused and frightened, but Cole kept his voice low and calm, and eventually she swallowed the medicine. Then he eased her back down and covered her with every blanket he could find. "She's going to be okay," he told Nora, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Fevers like this could turn bad fast. But the little girl needed to hear the words, so he said them. "The medicine will work. She just needs to rest." Nora looked at him with swimming eyes. "What if it doesn't work?" Cole took her small hand in his. "Then we'll figure something else out. But I'm not leaving. You understand? I'm staying right here." "You promise?" "I promise." Maggie came back inside, stamping snow off her boots. "Your horse is settled. He ate good." She looked at her mother in the bed, and her face went tight with worry. "Is she—" "She's fighting," Cole said, "and your mama's a fighter, I can tell." They kept vigil through the evening. Cole made a thin soup from the supplies he'd brought, mostly broth and some dried vegetables, and convinced both girls to eat. They didn't want to, wanted to stay by their mother's side, but he insisted. If Evelyn got worse, they'd need their strength. As night fell and the temperature dropped again, Cole built up the fire and positioned himself in the chair between the stove and the bed. He told the girls stories, old stories from his own childhood before everything went wrong, and watched the shadows dance on the walls. Maggie fell asleep first, curled on the floor near her mother. Nora lasted longer, fighting her exhaustion, until finally her eyes closed and her breathing went slow and steady. Cole sat alone in the firelight, listening to Evelyn's labored breathing, watching the rise and fall of her chest. The medicine was working, her fever had dropped slightly, and the wild delirium had faded. But she wasn't out of danger yet. Sometime near midnight, her eyes opened. For the first time since he'd returned, they were clear. "Cole?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here. You came back. Said I would. Did you—" She swallowed, her throat working. "Did you see him? Drayton?" "I saw him." "And?" Cole leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice low so he wouldn't wake the girls. "He knows something's happening. He saw me, and he'll be asking questions. We don't have 5 days anymore, Evelyn. We've got less." Fear flickered in her eyes, but underneath it was something harder, something determined. "Then what do we do?" Cole looked at the sleeping girls, at the cabin that was barely holding together, at this woman who'd held on through death and theft and sickness and was still asking what came next instead of giving up. And he made a choice. "We stop running," he said quietly. "We turn and fight." Evelyn's hand found his, her grip weak but steady. "I'm tired of running." "I know. Me too." Cole squeezed her hand gently. "So rest now. Get your strength back. Because when you're ready, we're going to burn Caleb Drayton's world down around his ears." A smile ghosted across Evelyn's face, fierce and feral and full of hope. Then her eyes closed again, and she slept. But this time it was the sleep of healing, not the delirium of fever. Cole sat in the darkness, the fire burning low, and felt the old purpose settling into his bones. He'd failed before. He'd lost everything that mattered, but maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to make something right. The wind picked up outside, rattling the cabin walls, but inside it was warm and safe and alive. And Cole Rourke, the man who'd been running from himself for 3 years, finally stopped running. The morning came cold and bright, the kind of winter dawn that made everything look clean and new even when it wasn't. Cole woke to find Maggie, already up, standing at the window with her small hands pressed against the glass, her breath fogging the pane. "What do you see?" he asked quietly, not wanting to startle her. "Riders," she said, and her voice was small and tight. 7 of them, coming from the south. Cole was on his feet in an instant, crossing to the window. Sure enough, through the trees he could see them, 7 men on horseback, moving at a steady pace through the snow. They were still maybe a mile out, but they were heading straight for the cabin. "Nora," Cole said, keeping his voice calm and level. "Wake your mama. Gentle now." Nora scrambled off the bed where she'd been curled beside Evelyn and shook her mother's shoulder. "Mama, Mama, wake up." Evelyn's eyes opened, clearer than yesterday, but still fever-bright. The medicine had helped, but she wasn't recovered. Not nearly. "What's wrong?" "Company coming," Cole said. He was already moving, checking his Colt, pulling on his boots. 7 riders. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Evelyn pushed herself up to sitting, swaying slightly. "It's them. It's Drayton's men. I know it." "You don't know that for sure." "Yes, I do." She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by hope. "They're coming because you went to town, because you asked questions, because someone noticed." Cole cursed under his breath. She was right. He'd been careful, but not careful enough. In a town like Salvation, a stranger showing up asking for medicine for an unnamed friend might as well have taken out an advertisement. The doctor had tried to warn him, but Cole had gone to that window anyway, had stared Drayton down, had issued a challenge whether he meant to or not. "The root cellar," Cole said. "You and the girls, right now." "No." Evelyn was climbing out of bed, her legs shaky but her face set hard. "This is my home, my land. I'm not hiding while they burn it down around me." "Evelyn? No." She reached under the bed and pulled out the small pistol, the same one she'd pointed at Cole 2 days ago. "James built this cabin with his own hands. He died for this land. I won't let them take it without a fight." Cole saw the determination in her face and knew arguing would waste time they didn't have. Fine. But the girls go to the cellar. No arguments on that. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. Maggie, Nora, you know where to go. But Mama, Maggie started. Now. Evelyn's voice cracked like a whip, the kind of voice that allowed no disobedience. You take Nora, you get in that cellar, and you don't come out until Cole or I come for you. You understand? Maggie's face crumpled, but she nodded. She took Nora's hand, and the younger girl was already crying, but Maggie pulled her toward the back door. Cole followed them out, the cold hitting him like a fist after the warmth of the cabin. The root cellar was 20 yards behind the house, covered with a slanted door that was nearly invisible under the snow. Cole pulled the door open, revealing wooden steps leading down into darkness. There's blankets down there? Maggie nodded. And jars of food. We'll be okay. You stay quiet. You stay hidden. No matter what you hear. Cole knelt down to their level, looking from one girl to the other. I made you a promise, remember? I said I'd keep you safe. I'm keeping that promise. Nora threw her arms around his neck, hugging him fierce and desperate. Don't die, Mr. Cole. Please don't die. Not planning on it. He hugged her back, then gently disentangled himself and handed her down to Maggie, who was already on the steps. Go on now. And Maggie, you're the bravest girl I've ever met. Your papa would be so proud. Maggie's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded and took her sister's hand. Cole watched them disappear into the darkness, then closed the door and kicked snow over it until it looked like nothing but a drift. Then he ran back to the cabin, his breath steaming in the cold air. Inside, Evelyn had positioned herself by the window, the pistol in her hand. She'd pulled on a coat over her nightdress and tied her hair back, and despite the fever still burning in her cheeks, she looked like someone ready to make a stand. How many bullets you got? Cole asked. 6. You? 18, plus what's in the gun. Cole moved to the other window, the one facing the approach. The riders were closer now, close enough that he could see they all carried rifles. You know how to shoot that thing? James taught me. I'm not great, but I can hit what I'm aiming at if it's close enough. Close is what we'll get. Cole's mind was racing, calculating angles and distances. The cabin had 2 windows in front, one in back, and the door. 7 men meant they'd probably split up, some to the front, some to circle around. If they just wanted to burn the place down, they'd have done it already from a distance. But they were coming in, which meant they wanted something. Maybe the journal. Maybe to make sure there were no witnesses. The sound of hoofbeats carried clear in the cold air. Then voices, men calling to each other. The riders came into view through the front window, 5 of them stopping maybe 30 yards out, spreading into a loose line. The other 2 would be circling around back. One of the men dismounted, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face like weathered leather and a star pinned to his coat. The sheriff. He raised a hand and the others went quiet. Mrs. Hart, the sheriff called out, his voice carrying across the snow. This is Sheriff Grady. I need to speak with you. Official business. Evelyn's hand tightened on her pistol. Stay inside, Cole said quietly. Let me handle this. He opened the door just enough to be seen, keeping his body behind the thick wood. Morning, Sheriff. Little early for house calls, isn't it? The sheriff's eyes narrowed, studying Cole. And who might you be? Just a traveler who stopped to help a sick woman and her children. That's so. The sheriff spat into the snow. Funny thing, Mr. Drayton mentioned seeing a stranger in town yesterday. Said this stranger was asking questions, making trouble. I bought medicine from the doctor. That's not trouble, that's commerce. Maybe. Or maybe you're sticking your nose where it don't belong. The sheriff's hand rested casual-like on the gun at his hip. See, Mrs. Hart here has been spreading lies about Mr. Drayton, making accusations. And that's a serious thing. Slander, some might call it. Others might call it something worse. Cole's jaw tightened. What I see is a sick woman and 2 little girls trying to survive the winter. Don't see any lies in that. What you see don't matter. You're not from here. You don't know the situation. The sheriff took a step forward. Now, I'm going to ask you nicely to step aside. We need to have a conversation with Mrs. Hart, private-like. She's sick, fever, can barely stand. Cole kept his voice level, reasonable. Whatever conversation you need can wait until she's well. Can't wait, I'm afraid. See, There's been some property go missing from Mr. Drayton's office. Important papers, and we have reason to believe Mrs. Hart might know something about that. So that was the play. Accuse Evelyn of theft, search the cabin, find the journal, destroy it. Neat and legal. At least on paper. Cole had seen this game played before in a dozen towns, and it always ended the same way, with the powerful staying powerful and the weak getting buried. She doesn't know anything about missing papers, Cole said. Then you won't mind us coming in to look around. I mind. Cole's hand moved to his Colt. I mind a lot. The sheriff's face went hard. Son, you're interfering with the law. That's a crime. Now I'm trying to be reasonable here, but my patience is running thin. Your patience? Cole's laugh was cold. You ride up here with 6 armed men on a woman's property, sick woman at that, and you want to talk about patience. Tell me, Sheriff, how much is Drayton paying you to do his dirty work? The sheriff's face flushed red. You best watch your mouth. Or what? You'll shoot me? Go ahead and try. But know this, every man here will be seen, every face remembered. And when federal marshals come asking questions about what happened to the widow Hart and her children, your name will be first on the list. It was a bluff. Cole had no way to contact federal marshals, no authority to do anything. But he said it with the kind of cold certainty that came from years of facing down bad men, and he saw doubt flicker in the sheriff's eyes. Then a voice came from behind the line of riders, and Cole's gut went cold. Enough talking. A man rode forward on a black horse, the same man Cole had seen in the bank window, Caleb Drayton. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall and silver-haired, dressed in a fine wool coat that probably cost more than this entire cabin. His face was handsome in the way a snake was handsome, all smooth lines and cold eyes. You must be the troublemaker, Drayton said, his voice cultured and calm. The one who thinks he can ride into my town and cause problems. Your town, Cole said. Funny, I thought it belonged to everyone who lived here. A common misconception. Drayton smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Let me be clear, Mr. Rourke. Mr. Rourke, this woman is on my property. She has stolen documents that belong to me, and you are trespassing. Now, I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to forget this little incident if you walk away right now. Saddle your horse, ride out, and never come back. Do that, and you'll live to see tomorrow. Cole felt Evelyn move up beside him, the pistol still in her hand. She looked like hell, pale and shaking, but her voice was steady. This is my land, Drayton. My husband paid for it with his sweat and blood. You don't get to take it just because you've got a crooked sheriff in your pocket. Drayton's smile widened. There she is, the grieving widow. Tell me, Evelyn, have you been sleeping well? Or do you see James when you close your eyes? Do you see him drowning in his own blood, crying for help that never came? Evelyn flinched like she'd been struck, and Cole saw red. You son of a... I didn't kill him, Drayton said, his voice conversational. But I knew he was going to die. Knew it 3 days before the accident. Funny how that works, isn't it? When you own the mill, when you pay the foreman, when you make sure certain safety measures aren't quite as safe as they should be. Well, accidents happen. The admission hung in the cold air like poison. Even the sheriff looked uncomfortable, shifting in his saddle. But Drayton didn't care. He'd already decided these people weren't leaving alive to tell anyone. You're a monster, Evelyn whispered. I'm a businessman. There's a difference. Drayton's eyes moved to Cole. Last chance, Mr. Rourke. Ride away, or die here for people you don't even know. Cole's hand was steady on his Colt. I've made stupider choices. Drayton sighed like he was genuinely disappointed. Then he nodded to his men. Burn them out. Everything happened at once. 2 of the riders pulled torches from their saddles, already lit, already burning. They spurred their horses forward, and Cole saw the plan clear as day. They'd throw the torches onto the roof, set the cabin ablaze, and shoot anyone who ran out. Cole fired first. His bullet took the nearest rider in the shoulder, spinning him sideways in the saddle. The torch fell from his hand, landing in the snow with a hiss. The second rider got his torch airborne, and it arced through the air toward the cabin roof. Evelyn fired through the window, her bullet going wide but close enough to make the horses shy and dance. The torch hit the edge of the roof and caught, flames starting to spread across the old dry wood. Then hell broke loose. The riders scattered, 3 of them charging the front while the sheriff and another man wheeled around to the back. Cole fired again and again, each shot measured and careful. He hit one man in the leg, another in the chest. Evelyn was firing too, her hand shaking but her aim true enough. Glass shattered as bullets tore through the windows, and Cole pulled Evelyn down just as a round whistled past where her head had been. "Stay low," he shouted over the gunfire. "Reload when you can." The roof was burning now, smoke starting to pour into the cabin. Cole could hear the crackle of flames, could feel the heat building overhead. They had minutes at best before the whole structure went up. A rider came crashing through the back window, his horse screaming as it kicked and thrashed in the confined space. The man was firing wild, bullets punching holes in the walls, and Cole rolled, came up firing, and put 2 rounds center mass. The man fell, and his horse bolted back out the broken window, dragging its rider's body through the snow. "The barn," Evelyn gasped, coughing from the smoke. "Your horse!" Cole looked through the front window and saw flames licking at the barn's walls. One of Drayton's men had set it ablaze while they were focused on the cabin. Rage burned hotter than the fire. Cole kicked open the front door and ran, bullets kicking up snow around his feet. He hit the barn at a dead run, tore open the door, and found his gelding wild-eyed and terrified as fire spread across the hay. Cole grabbed the horse's halter, talking low and fast, and led him out just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. They burst into the open air, and Cole saw a rider bearing down on them, rifle raised. Cole fired from under his horse's neck, an impossible shot, the kind you made when you had no choice, and the rider's head snapped back. 3 down, 4 still moving. Cole ran back toward the cabin, using his horse as cover. Evelyn was at the door, her face black with smoke, still firing that little pistol. The cabin's roof was fully engulfed now, flames reaching for the sky. They couldn't stay inside, they'd burn or suffocate. "Cellar!" Cole shouted. "We go to the girls, now!" Evelyn nodded, stumbling after him as they ran for the back of the cabin. The sheriff appeared around the corner, his gun drawn, and Evelyn shot him. The bullet hit him in the gut, and he went down hard, gasping and clawing at the snow. They reached the cellar door just as the remaining riders converged. Cole yanked it open, shoved Evelyn down the steps, and turned to face them. 2 men, both with rifles, both taking aim. Cole's Colt clicked empty. Time seemed to slow. Cole saw the fingers tightening on triggers, saw the barrels coming level with his chest. He was going to die. After everything, after promising those girls he'd keep them safe, he was going to die in the snow behind a burning cabin. Then a shot rang out from inside the cabin, from a window Cole hadn't been watching. One of the riders jerked and fell. The other spun, confused, and that gave Cole the seconds he needed to reload. He fired 3 times, and the last rider went down. Cole turned and saw Maggie standing in the cabin doorway, holding a rifle that was nearly as big as she was, her face set in lines of fury and determination. She must have come up from the cellar when she heard the fighting, must have found her father's old rifle, must have made the shot that saved Cole's life. "Maggie, get down here!" Cole yelled. The girl dropped the rifle and ran, sliding down the steps into the cellar as the cabin's roof finally gave way with a roar. Flames shot into the sky, and burning debris rained down around them. Cole pulled the cellar door shut just as a burning beam crashed where he'd been standing. In the darkness below, Cole could hear crying, Nora sobbing, Evelyn coughing, Maggie breathing hard from fear and adrenaline. He fumbled for matches, got one lit, and found a lantern hanging on the wall. The small flame pushed back the darkness, revealing the cramped space lined with shelves of canned goods and root vegetables. "Is everyone okay?" Cole asked, his voice rough from smoke. "Anyone hit?" "We're okay," Evelyn managed between coughs. "The girls—" "I shot a man," Maggie said, her voice small and shocked. "I shot a man, and he fell down." Cole pulled the girl into his arms, and she collapsed against him, shaking. "You saved my life. You hear me? You saved my life, and that makes you the bravest person I've ever known." "I killed him." "You protected your family. There's a difference." Cole held her tight, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. "It's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel bad about it. But you did what you had to do, and I'm proud of you." Nora crawled over and wrapped her arms around both of them, and then Evelyn was there too, and they all held each other in the flickering lantern light, while above them the cabin burned and the bodies of Drayton's men lay cooling in the snow. After a long moment, Cole pulled back and looked at Evelyn. Drayton wasn't with them at the end. He stayed back. He'll tell the town we attacked his men, that we're murderers. He'll bring the whole town down on us. Then what do we do? Evelyn's voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. Cole thought about the journal still tucked inside his coat. He thought about the sheriff bleeding out in the snow, about the men who'd come to burn them alive. He thought about how far evil could spread when good people stayed quiet. We stop running, he said. We take the fight to him. We show this town what Drayton really is. How? Maggie asked, her face still pressed against his chest. Everyone's afraid of him. Fear only works when people think they're alone. Cole looked at each of them in turn. We show them they're not alone. We show them the truth. And we make Drayton answer for what he's done. Evelyn nodded slowly. The journal. The journal. And our testimony. And the bodies of the men he sent to kill us. Cole's voice was hard as iron. We turn his own violence against him. We make him the monster everyone can see. Above them, the sounds of the fire were starting to fade. The cabin was gone. Cole knew that. Everything the Hart family had built, every memory of James, every piece of their life together, reduced to ash and smoke. But they were alive. All four of them were alive. And sometimes that was enough to build on. They waited in the cellar for an hour, letting the fire burn itself out, letting the smoke clear. When Cole finally pushed the door open, the world above was transformed. The cabin was a blackened skeleton, still smoking. The barn was gone completely. The snow for 20 yards in every direction was stained with blood and ash, and in that circle of destruction lay 6 bodies. 6 men who'd come to murder a widow and her children on the orders of a man who valued copper more than human life. Cole climbed out first, his gun drawn, checking to make sure no one else was coming. The landscape was empty except for the dead. The horses had scattered, probably running until they found shelter or dropped from exhaustion. The only sound was the wind and the crackle of dying embers. He helped Evelyn and the girls out of the cellar. Nora immediately pressed her face against her mother's coat, not looking at the bodies. Maggie looked, though. She looked at everything, her young face aging years in moments. Is he dead? Maggie asked, pointing at the sheriff. Cole walked over and checked. The man was still breathing, but barely. The gut shot had done its work. He'd be dead within the hour, maybe less. He's dying, Cole said. Good, Maggie said, and there was no mercy in her voice. Cole couldn't blame her. The sheriff had come here to kill them, had worn his badge while doing Drayton's dirty work. Some men didn't deserve mercy. But he also saw how Evelyn looked at her daughter, saw the worry there, the fear that this violence would mark Maggie forever. Sheriff Grady, Cole said, kneeling beside the dying man, can you hear me? The sheriff's eyes opened, glazed with pain. Go to hell. Probably will. But before I do, I'm going to make sure Drayton gets there first. Cole leaned closer. You've got minutes left. You want to die knowing you threw away your life for a man who murdered James Hart, who stole from decent people, who sent you here to kill children. The sheriff coughed, blood flecking his lips. Didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You made yours, but you can still do one decent thing before you go. Cole pulled out the journal. This belonged to James Hart. It's evidence. Proof of everything Drayton's done. I need someone in this town who isn't bought and paid for. Someone who might listen. The sheriff's eyes focused on the journal, and something like regret crossed his face. June Miller. General store, she's honest. Her husband, Drayton, foreclosed on him. Took their land. She hates him. June Miller, Cole repeated. Anyone else? Deputy Grant Hale. He's young, stupid, but clean. The sheriff coughed again, harder. Tell him Grady said to do the right thing. He'll understand. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm dying. Because I was a coward. The sheriff's eyes closed. Should have stopped him. Years ago. His breathing went shallow, then stopped. Cole stood, brushing snow off his knees. 7 men dead, a family's home destroyed. And somewhere in town, Caleb Drayton was probably already spinning his story, painting himself as the victim, the Hart family as murderers. But now Cole had names: June Miller, Deputy Grant Hale, people who might listen, people who might help. "What now?" Evelyn asked, her arms around both her daughters. Cole looked at the ruins of the cabin, at the bodies in the snow, at this family that had lost everything and was still standing. "Now we go into town. We find the people who still have a conscience, and we show them what their silence has cost." "They'll arrest us," Evelyn said, "or kill us. Drayton will make sure of it." "Maybe. Or maybe people are tired of being afraid. Maybe they've been waiting for someone to stand up first." Cole holstered his gun and offered his hand to Evelyn. "I can't promise we'll win, but I can promise we'll make Drayton bleed for what he's done. And sometimes that has to be enough." Evelyn looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it, her grip firm despite the fever still burning in her. "Then let's go make him bleed." They rode into Salvation 2 hours later, and the sight they made would be talked about for years to come. Cole led the way on his gelding, the journal tucked inside his coat. Behind him came Evelyn on one of the dead men's horses, sitting tall despite the fever that still burned in her veins, her daughters riding double in front of her. They'd wrapped themselves in blankets pulled from the root cellar, but underneath you could see the smoke stains, the blood, the evidence of what they'd survived. And trailing behind them, tied with rope and dragged through the snow, were 2 bodies. The sheriff and one of Drayton's men, proof of what had happened, proof of who'd attacked first. People stopped in the street to stare. A woman gasped and pulled her child close. Men came out of the saloon, drinks forgotten. By the time Cole reached the center of town, a crowd had gathered, silent, shocked, uncertain. Cole stopped his horse in front of the general store. The sign above the door read Miller's Dry Goods, and through the window he could see a woman arranging cans on a shelf. She looked up at the sound of voices, and her eyes went wide. Cole dismounted and tied his horse to the rail. Then he turned to face the crowd that was growing larger by the moment. He saw fear in their faces, but also curiosity. And underneath that, buried deep, he saw something that might have been hope. "My name is Cole Rourke," he said, his voice carrying clear in the cold air. "3 days ago, I stopped at the Hart farm to help a sick woman and her children. This morning, 7 men came to burn them out. 7 men led by your sheriff, sent by Caleb Drayton." He gestured to the bodies. 6 of them are dead. The 7th ran. And before Sheriff Grady died, he told me the truth about what's been happening in this town. The crowd murmured, uncertain. A man near the front, young, with a deputy's badge on his coat, pushed forward. "That's a serious accusation, mister. Sheriff Grady was a good man." "Sheriff Grady was a bought man," Cole said flatly. "And you must be Deputy Hale." The young deputy's eyes widened. "How did you—" "The sheriff told me about you. Said you were clean. Said to tell you to do the right thing." Cole pulled the journal from his coat and held it up for everyone to see. "This belonged to James Hart. Inside are 5 years of records, every crooked loan, every foreclosure, every piece of property Caleb Drayton stole through fraud and murder. And yes, I said murder. James Hart didn't die in an accident. He was killed because he knew too much." A woman's voice cut through the crowd. "That's a lie." Cole turned to see a heavy-set woman in an expensive dress, her face flushed with anger. "Mr. Drayton is a pillar of this community. He built the new church. He funds the school. He built the church with money stolen from families he destroyed," Evelyn said, her voice weak but clear. She slid down from the horse, Maggie and Nora clinging to her, and faced the crowd. "My husband kept those records because he saw what was happening. He saw good people lose everything while Drayton got richer. And when James tried to do something about it, he died. Crushed at the mill. An accident, they said. But Drayton admitted it this morning. Admitted he made sure that accident happened." The crowd's murmur grew louder. Cole saw doubt flickering in faces, saw people looking at each other and wondering. The door to the general store opened and a woman stepped out, 50-ish, gray-haired, with sharp eyes that took in everything at a glance. "June Miller?" Cole asked. "That's right." She looked at the bodies, at Evelyn and the girls, at the journal in Cole's hand. "I heard what you said about my husband, about the foreclosure." "Sheriff Grady told me," Cole said. Said Drayton took your land. June's mouth tightened. 3 years ago. Said we owed more than we could pay. Said the bank had no choice. We lost the farm. Lost everything we'd built in 20 years. My husband drank himself to death 6 months later, and I've been working in this store ever since, just to survive. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. But I kept records too. Every family that lost their land, every suspicious accident, every time someone questioned Drayton and ended up dead or ruined, I've got names, dates, everything. Cole felt hope kindle in his chest. Will you testify to it? Testify to who? The sheriff's dead. The judge is Drayton's cousin. The town council is in his pocket. June's voice was bitter. There's no law here except what Drayton says it is. Then we make our own law, Cole said. We show people the truth and let them decide. It won't work, someone called from the crowd. Drayton owns this town. He'll crush anyone who stands against him. He already tried to crush us, Maggie said, her young voice cutting through the doubt. She slipped down from the horse and stood beside Cole, her chin lifted. He sent men to burn us out, to kill us. And we're still here. We're still alive, because we fought back. The crowd went quiet, looking at this small girl with her soot-stained face and her fierce eyes. Then Nora climbed down too, standing beside her sister, and even though she was trembling, her voice was steady. We're not afraid anymore. Cole saw something shift in the crowd. He saw a man in a farmer's coat straighten his shoulders. He saw a woman with work-worn hands nod slowly. He saw Deputy Hale looking at the journal with hunger in his eyes. The hunger of someone who'd seen corruption eating away at justice and had been powerless to stop it. Then the crowd parted, and Caleb Drayton stepped through. He was dressed immaculately as always, his silver hair catching the sunlight, his face arranged in an expression of concerned shock. Behind him came 3 more men, not the hired guns from this morning, but respectable-looking men in suits. Town councilmen, Cole guessed. What a tragedy, Drayton said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Sheriff Grady was a good man, a loyal servant of this town, and to see him struck down by this outsider and his accomplices. He shook his head sadly. Mrs. Hart, I know you've been unwell. Grief does terrible things to the mind. But to attack lawmen? To kill them? That's not the way civilized people handle their problems. You sent them to kill us, Evelyn said, her voice shaking with fury. You admitted it yourself. You said you knew James was going to die before it happened. You said, I said nothing of the sort, Drayton interrupted smoothly. You were delirious with fever, my dear, imagining things. It's understandable given your condition. He turned to the crowd. Mrs. Hart has been ill for weeks. She's been making wild accusations, threatening legal action, disturbing the peace. I tried to be patient, tried to be kind. But when she began spreading lies about the bank, I had no choice but to ask Sheriff Grady to intervene, to help her. And this is how she repays that kindness, with murder. Cole saw the crowd wavering. Drayton was good, smooth as silk, reasonable as a judge. He was painting Evelyn as crazy, Cole as a violent drifter, the whole thing as a tragic misunderstanding that ended in dead lawmen. He's lying, Cole said flatly. And I can prove it. Drayton's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. Can you now? And what proof would that be? Cole held up the journal. James Hart's records. 5 years of fraud, documented in detail. Every illegal loan, every foreclosure based on forged papers, every property you stole. It's all here. Ah, yes, the famous journal. Drayton's voice was mocking now. I've heard about this. Mrs. Hart has been claiming her husband kept such records, but I've never seen them. No one has. For all we know, that's just a book of recipes or farm accounts or complete fabrication. Then let Deputy Hale examine it, Cole said. Let him read it. Let everyone here see what's inside. Drayton's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of rage in those cold eyes. That journal, if it exists, was stolen from my office. It's bank property, and I demand it be returned immediately. So you admit it exists, Cole said, and he saw Drayton realize his mistake. You admit James Hart kept records you wanted badly enough to kill for. The crowd murmured again, louder now. Doubt was spreading like cracks in ice. Drayton felt it too, because his pleasant expression hardened into something uglier. "Enough of this circus," he snapped. "Deputy Hale, arrest these people, all of them. Charge them with murder, theft, trespassing, and anything else you can think of." Deputy Hale hesitated, his hand on his gun but not drawing it. "Mr. Drayton, I think we should hear what they have to say. If there's evidence, there is no evidence except the bodies of good men killed by criminals." Drayton's voice rose, losing its cultured smoothness. "Do your job, deputy, or I'll find someone who will." Cole saw the moment of decision in Hale's face. The young deputy looked at Drayton, then at the journal, then at Maggie and Nora standing small and brave beside their mother. Whatever calculation he made, it came down on the side of courage. "No, sir," Hale said quietly. "I won't arrest them. Not until I've seen the evidence for myself." Drayton's face flushed dark red. "You're fired, you hear me? You're done in this town." "Maybe," Hale said, "but I'll sleep better." It was the crack that broke the dam. June Miller stepped forward, her voice strong. "I'll testify. I've got records of my own. I'll swear to everything I've seen." A farmer pushed through the crowd. "Drayton foreclosed on my brother 2 years ago. Said he owed money we know he'd already paid. I'll testify too." Another voice. "My cousin died in a barn fire right after he complained about the bank's interest rates. Seemed mighty convenient." And another. "I saw those papers Drayton claims James Hart signed. The signatures didn't look right to me, but I was afraid to say anything." One by one, people stepped forward. Not everyone. There were still plenty who hung back, afraid or loyal to Drayton, or just too beaten down to fight. But enough. Enough to show that the town's silence had been fear, not agreement. Drayton saw his control slipping and played his last card. "You're all fools, idiots. You think you can stand against me? I own this town. I own the judge, the land office, the bank. I have connections in Cheyenne, in Denver. I'll destroy every one of you who testifies. I'll take your homes, your businesses, your lives." He pointed at Cole. "And as for you, you're a dead man. You just don't know it yet." Cole smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd been threatened by better men than Drayton and survived them all. "You already tried to kill me once today. Didn't work out so well for your hired guns. Then I'll hire better ones. Go ahead, but while you're doing that, this journal is going to the territorial governor. Deputy Hale's going to make copies, several copies, and they're going to every newspaper, every federal marshal, every judge between here and Washington. And then we're going to see how many connections you really have when everyone knows you're a murderer and a thief." Drayton's control finally shattered. His hand went to his coat, reaching for something inside, and Cole's gun was out before the motion was complete. The crowd scattered, people diving for cover, and suddenly it was just Cole and Drayton facing each other in the empty street. "Don't," Cole said quietly. "Cole, you pull that gun, and I'll drop you where you stand. That's not a threat. That's a promise." Drayton's hand froze. For the first time, genuine fear showed in his face. He'd spent so long being untouchable, so long having other people do his violence for him, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to face death directly. Slowly, very slowly, Drayton raised his hands away from his coat. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. You just don't accept it yet." Cole kept his gun level. "Deputy Hale, would you be so kind as to check Mr. Drayton for weapons?" Hale moved forward, cautious but determined. He pulled a small derringer from Drayton's coat pocket, then stepped back. "Got it. Thank you. Now, Mr. Drayton, I believe you have a choice to make. You can come quietly, let the law sort this out proper-like, or you can run. But if you run, everyone here will know you're guilty. Every doubt, every question, running answers them all." Drayton looked around at the crowd that had gathered again, at the faces of people he'd controlled through fear and money for years. He saw June Miller's hard smile. He saw the farmers and merchants and workers who'd finally found their courage. He saw his power crumbling like sand. "You'll regret this," he said to Cole, but his voice had lost its strength. "All of you will regret this." "Maybe," Cole said, "but at least we'll regret it free." Hale produced a pair of iron manacles, old and rusty, but serviceable. He locked them around Drayton's wrists, and the click of metal seemed to echo in the sudden silence. The most powerful man in Salvation, Wyoming, was now a prisoner. The three councilmen who'd come with Drayton tried to fade back into the crowd, but June blocked their path. "Oh no, you three are going to sit down and write out everything you know about Drayton's operations. Every bribe, every threat, every crooked deal. And if you cooperate, maybe you'll only lose your positions instead of your freedom." The men looked at each other, then at Drayton standing in chains, then at the crowd that was watching them with eyes that promised no mercy for further betrayal. One by one, they nodded. June turned to Cole. "We'll need somewhere to hold him. The jail's too small, and too many of his men have keys." "The church," someone suggested. "It's got a strong door, and everyone can watch it." There was a dark irony in locking Drayton in the church he'd built with stolen money, but no one objected. Hale marched the banker up the street, and half the town followed, while the other half stood in the street looking at each other like they couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Cole holstered his gun and turned to find Evelyn swaying on her feet, her face pale as milk. He caught her before she fell, and Maggie was there instantly, supporting her mother's other side. "Mama needs rest," Maggie said, her voice urgent. "Real rest. In a real bed." June stepped forward. "Bring her to my place. It's above the store. Not fancy, but clean and warm. The girls can stay too." "Thank you," Evelyn managed, though her eyes were glazing with fever again. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was fading fast. They got her upstairs to June's rooms, two small spaces that were indeed clean and warm, with a bed that had a real mattress instead of straw. Evelyn collapsed onto it, and June immediately began stripping away her smoke-stained clothes, replacing them with a clean nightgown while Cole waited outside with the girls. Nora was crying again. Not from fear this time, but from exhaustion and relief and the overwhelming weight of everything that had happened. Maggie held her sister close, but Cole could see the strain in the older girl's face, could see how close she was to breaking. He knelt down and opened his arms, and both girls came to him, pressing their faces against his chest while their small bodies shook with sobs. Cole held them and let them cry, because they'd earned the right to tears, earned it with their courage and their suffering and their refusal to give up. "It's over," he said softly. "The fighting's over. You're safe now." "Is Mama going to be okay?" Nora asked through her tears. "She's going to be fine. June will take good care of her, and the doctor will come check on her. Your Mama's strong, strongest woman I've ever met besides you two." Maggie pulled back and looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "What's going to happen now? We don't have a home anymore. We don't have anything." Cole brushed the hair back from her face, his throat tight. "You have each other. You have this town, and it's waking up now, waking up from a long nightmare. People will help. You'll see." June appeared in the doorway. "Your Mama's sleeping. Fever's still high, but her breathing's better. I gave her more of that medicine, and the doctor's on his way." She looked at the girls. "Are you two hungry? I've got soup on the stove downstairs." Both girls nodded, and June led them away, leaving Cole alone in the narrow hallway. He leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling every bruise, every burn, every moment of the past 3 days. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the aftermath of violence, from the knowledge of how close they'd all come to dying. He heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up to see Deputy Hale. The young man looked older than he had an hour ago, like he'd aged a year in the time it took to lock Drayton in the church. "We've got a problem," Hale said without preamble. "Drayton's men, the ones who weren't at the Hart place this morning, they're gathering at the saloon, maybe 15 or 20 of them. They're armed, and they're talking about breaking Drayton out." Cole's jaw tightened. Of course they were. Men like that didn't just give up when their boss got arrested. They had too much invested in keeping Drayton free and powerful. "How many men can you count on?" Cole asked. "If it comes to a fight?" Hale considered. 10, maybe 12. Farmers, mostly. Men who've got reason to hate Drayton. But they're not fighters, not really. They're just tired of being afraid. That's enough. Being tired of fear is how you find courage." Cole pushed himself off the wall, ignoring his body's protests. "We need to move fast. Get your men. Arm them with whatever weapons you can find. Post guards at the church, 2 men at least, with rifles. Tell them if anyone tries to break Drayton out, They shoot first and ask questions later. What are you going to do? Cole smiled grimly. I'm going to have a conversation with some hired guns. Explain to them that their employer's going to prison and their paychecks are about to stop coming. See if that changes their enthusiasm for dying in his service. Hale looked at him like he was crazy. They'll kill you. They'll try, but I'm harder to kill than I look. Cole checked his Colt, reloaded it from the ammunition in his belt. One more thing. That journal needs to be copied tonight. Multiple copies, hidden in different places. Can you do that? I can write fast. June can help. We'll have it done by morning. Good. Cole started down the stairs, then stopped and looked back at Hale. You did the right thing today, standing up to Drayton. Your sheriff was right about you. You're clean. This town's going to need that in the days ahead. Hale's face colored with the compliment. What about you? Will you stay? We could use someone like you, maybe as marshal, once things settle down. Cole thought about that, about staying in one place, about putting on a badge again, about trying to build instead of running. It was tempting, but he'd learned a long time ago that men like him didn't get happy endings in places like this. They got buried, or they got broken, or they just got used up until there was nothing left. I'll stay until it's finished, he said finally. Until Drayton's locked up proper and the town's back on its feet. After that, we'll see. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a refusal either, and for now, that would have to be enough. Cole walked out into the street just as the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon. The light was going golden, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. It would be night soon, and night was when bad men did their worst work. The Lucky Dollar Saloon sat at the end of the street like a crouched beast, yellow light spilling from its windows, the sound of angry voices carrying clear in the cold air. Cole could see horses tied to the rail outside. Too many horses. Hale hadn't exaggerated the numbers. Cole walked slowly, giving them time to see him coming, giving them time to decide whether they wanted this fight. He kept his hands loose at his sides, ready but not threatening. The conversations inside the saloon cut off as he pushed through the doors. The room was full of hard men, cowboys, drifters, the kind who worked for whoever paid best and didn't ask questions about the work. They all turned to look at Cole, and he saw the calculation in their eyes, the weighing of odds and chances. A man near the bar stood up, big and scarred, with a gun belt slung low on his hips. You got nerve walking in here? I've got something to say, Cole replied calmly. Figured it was worth saying to your faces instead of having you hear it secondhand. We ain't interested in your words. Then listen anyway. Caleb Drayton is finished. He's locked up, facing charges of murder and fraud. The evidence against him is solid, journal records, witness testimony, his own admissions. Come tomorrow, federal marshals will be on their way here, and Drayton's going to prison. Probably hang, given everything he's done. The big man spat on the floor. That's supposed to scare us? It's supposed to inform you. Drayton's not going to be signing any more paychecks. He's not going to be protecting you from the law. Every crime you committed in his service, every beating, every threat, every burned-out farm, that's all going to come back on you now. Cole let that sink in. Unless you're smart enough to walk away, leave town tonight, ride out, and never come back. Do that, and I'll make sure Deputy Hale doesn't come looking for you. And if we don't want to leave, another man asked, if we decide to break the boss out and settle accounts with you and anyone who helped you? Cole's expression went cold and flat. Then you'll die, all of you, because I'll kill every man who tries, and so will the citizens of this town. They're done being afraid. They've found their courage, and that makes them dangerous. The men looked at each other, uncertainty creeping into faces that had been hard and sure a moment before. They were hired guns, not fanatics. They fought for money, not loyalty. And Cole was offering them a way out that didn't end with them bleeding in the street. The big man stared at Cole for a long moment, then looked at his companions. What do you boys think? We signed on to rough up farmers and scare widows, not fight a war with the whole town. Drayton paid good, someone muttered. Hate to walk away from that. Drayton paid with stolen money, Cole said. Money that's going back to the people he took it from. There's nothing left for you, nothing but a rope if you stick around. Another long silence. Then, one by one, men started standing up, finishing their drinks, gathering their coats. They moved toward the door in twos and threes, not meeting Cole's eyes, just leaving. Within 5 minutes, 3/4 of them had cleared out. The big man was one of the last to go. He stopped beside Cole, his voice low. "You're either the bravest man I ever met or the dumbest. Can't decide which." "Doesn't matter, long as you're leaving." The man almost smiled. "Fair enough. Good luck with your town, mister. You're going to need it." Then he was gone, and Cole was left standing in the saloon with maybe 5 men still seated. The ones too stubborn or too stupid to take the offer, the ones who'd rather fight than think. Cole looked at them one by one. Last chance. No one moved. Their hands stayed near their guns, their faces hard with the kind of pride that got men killed. Cole sighed. He'd tried. That's all anyone could do. "Well then," he said quietly, and his hand moved to his Colt. The saloon erupted in gunfire. Cole drew and fired in one smooth motion, dropping the nearest man before his gun cleared leather. The others scattered, overturning tables, diving for cover. Bullets tore through wood and glass, and Cole rolled behind the bar as the shooting intensified. He came up firing, his shots measured and precise. Another man went down, then another. The remaining 2 ran for the back door, and Cole let them go. He'd made his point. The ones who wanted to fight were dead or running, and the ones who'd left would spread the word. Salvation was no longer safe territory for Drayton's men. Cole checked the bodies to make sure they were actually dead, then walked back out into the street. Deputy Hale was running toward him, a rifle in his hands, a dozen armed citizens behind him. They all stopped when they saw Cole, covered in gunpowder residue, but unhurt. "It's done," Cole said simply. "The rest of Drayton's men have left town. These 5 decided to stay." Hale looked through the saloon doors at the carnage inside, then back at Cole. "You took on 5 men alone?" "They weren't that good." Cole reloaded his Colt with steady hands. "You get the journal copied? June's working on it now. Should have 3 copies done by midnight. Good. Get one to the doctor. Tell him to hide it somewhere safe. Give another to someone you trust completely, someone Drayton wouldn't think to threaten. And keep the original with you." Cole holstered his gun. "How's the watch on the church?" "Strong. 8 men now, all armed. Nobody's getting Drayton out tonight." Cole nodded, feeling the exhaustion pulling at him again. The day had been impossibly long. From the attack at dawn to this moment felt like a lifetime compressed into hours. But it wasn't over yet. Not quite. "I need to check on the Hart family," he said. "Make sure they're settling in okay." He found them in June's rooms above the store. Evelyn was still sleeping, her breathing slower and easier now. The fever had broken. Cole could tell by the way the flush had faded from her cheeks, by the way she looked peaceful instead of tormented. Maggie and Nora were curled together in a chair by the window, both asleep, still in their smoke-stained clothes. June was sitting at a small table, copying the journal by lamplight, her hand moving swift and sure across the page. She looked up when Cole entered and set down her pen. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. "The shooting's done. The rest, we'll see." June nodded and returned to her copying. Cole moved to where the girls slept and carefully lifted first Nora, then Maggie, carrying them to the bed June had made up on the floor. They barely stirred, exhausted beyond waking. He covered them with blankets and stood looking down at them for a long moment. These children had saved his life today, had faced down evil with courage that would shame most grown men. They'd lost their father, their home, nearly their mother. But they were still here, still fighting, still believing that tomorrow could be better than today. Cole felt something crack open inside him, something that had been frozen solid since the day he'd buried his own son. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was the beginning of thaw, the first painful stirring of a heart he'd thought was dead. Evelyn's eyes opened, and she looked at him across the dim room. "Cole," she whispered. He moved to her bedside and took her hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been beaten with hammers and set on fire." A weak smile crossed her face. "But alive. We're alive. We are. Did we win?" Cole thought about Drayton locked in the church, about his men scattered or dead, about the journal being copied and evidence being gathered. He thought about a town finding its courage, about people standing up after years of bowing down. "Yes," he said finally. "I think we did." Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. James would be proud of the girls, of you, of all of us. He'd be proud of you most of all. You kept fighting when most would have given up. Evelyn squeezed his hand. "I couldn't give up, not with them counting on me." She paused, gathering strength. "What happens now? To us, I mean. We have no home, no—" "We'll figure it out," Cole said firmly. "The town owes you. Hell, I owe you. We'll rebuild the cabin or build a new one. We'll make sure you and the girls are taken care of." "And you?" Evelyn's eyes searched his face. "Will you stay?" It was the second time someone had asked him that question, and Cole still didn't have a good answer. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've been running for so long, I'm not sure I know how to stay." "Maybe it's time to learn." Before Cole could answer, there was a commotion downstairs, raised voices, the sound of boots on wood. Cole's hand went to his gun, and then Deputy Hale appeared in the doorway, his face urgent. "You need to come quick," Hale said. "There's someone here to see Drayton. Says he's a federal marshal. Says he's been investigating Drayton for months." Cole and Hale hurried downstairs to find a man waiting in the store, tall, weathered, with gray at his temples and a marshal's badge on his coat. He looked at Cole with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You must be Rourke," the marshal said. "I'm Ethan Crowley. I've been tracking Caleb Drayton's operations for the better part of a year. Had warrants prepared, witnesses lined up. Was planning to move in next week." He smiled wryly. "Seems you beat me to it." Cole felt relief wash over him. A federal marshal meant this was real, meant Drayton couldn't buy or intimidate his way free. "We've got evidence, journal records, witness testimony. How much do you need?" "Everything you've got. But from what Deputy Hales told me, it sounds like more than enough." Crowley's expression turned serious. "I heard about the shooting, about the men who died. I'll need statements from everyone involved. It was self-defense. They came to murder a sick woman and her children." "I believe you, but we'll still need to do this proper." Crowley looked around the store, at the townspeople who were gathering, at June still copying the journal by lamplight. "This town's been through hell, but it looks like you all came through the other side." "Some of us did," Cole said quietly, thinking of the bodies in the snow, of the lives destroyed by Drayton's greed. Crowley nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's how it goes sometimes. The innocent suffer while we chase the guilty. But what you did here, stopping Drayton, giving these people their courage back, that matters. That saves lives down the road." The marshal stayed through the night, taking statements, examining evidence, building his case. By dawn, he had everything he needed. Drayton would be transported to Cheyenne under heavy guard, would stand trial for murder, fraud, and a dozen other charges. With the evidence Cole and the town had gathered, plus what Crowley had already compiled, conviction was certain. The banker would hang, and his corrupt network would crumble with him. As the sun rose on a new day, Cole stood in the street watching Crowley and his deputies load Drayton into a prison wagon. The banker looked smaller now, diminished, his silver hair unkempt and his fine clothes rumpled. He caught Cole's eye as they locked the wagon door, and whatever he saw in Cole's face made him look away first. The wagon rolled out of town, and with it went the shadow that had hung over Salvation for too long. People came out of their homes to watch it go, and when it disappeared over the ridge, someone started cheering. Then everyone was cheering, hugging each other, crying and laughing all at once. Deputy Hale, now acting sheriff, shook Cole's hand with fierce gratitude. "We couldn't have done this without you." "You'd have done it eventually. I just sped things up." Cole looked at the young lawman. "This town needs someone honest wearing that badge, someone who'll stand up when it matters. Think you can handle that?" Hale squared his shoulders. "I can try." That's all anyone can ask. Cole made his way back to June's store, climbing the stairs to where the Hart family waited. He found all three of them awake. Evelyn sitting up in bed looking infinitely better, the girls on either side of her. They all looked at him with hope and question in their eyes. "It's over," Cole said. "Drayton's gone. The marshal took him to Cheyenne for trial. He won't be coming back." The relief that washed over their faces was painful to see. Three people who'd been carrying such weight finally able to set it down. Nora started crying, and this time they were tears of pure release. Maggie held her sister and her mother both, and Evelyn just closed her eyes and whispered something that might have been a prayer or might have been thanks. Cole stood in the doorway and watched them hold each other, this family that had survived everything the world threw at them. And he felt that frozen thing inside him crack a little more, felt warmth beginning to seep into places that had been cold for so long. But he still didn't know if he could stay. Later that morning, Cole stood in the ruins of the Hart cabin, surveying what was left. The snow had melted some in the morning sun, revealing the full extent of the destruction. Charred beams jutted up like broken bones, and ash covered everything in a layer of gray despair. The barn was completely gone, just a black smudge on the snow. But the root cellar had survived, and the well was intact, and the land itself remained. Good land. James Hart had chosen well. Cole heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Deputy Hale approaching, accompanied by a dozen men with tools slung over their shoulders. Saws, hammers, axes. Behind them came wagons loaded with lumber. "Figured you could use some help," Hale said. "These men all owe debts to Drayton that weren't real. Their farms are safe now. They want to pay that forward." A grizzled farmer stepped forward, his face weathered by decades of hard work. "Name's Tom Hendricks. Drayton took my land 2 years back, said I owed money I never borrowed. Now that he's gone and the real records are coming out, I'm getting my place back. But the Hart family, they lost everything fighting for all of us. Seems only right we help them rebuild." Cole felt his throat tighten. "Mrs. Hart and the girls are still at June's place. Evelyn's recovering, but she's not strong enough yet to—" "We ain't asking permission," another man interrupted. "We're just doing what neighbors do, what we should have done a long time ago before things got so bad." Throughout the day, men arrived in steady streams. Some brought lumber salvaged from their own barns. Others brought nails, tools, supplies. The women came too, bringing food and blankets and offers to sew new clothes for the girls. By noon, the foundation for a new cabin had been laid, and the sound of hammers and saws filled the air where there had been only silence and ash. Cole worked alongside them, his hands blistering on the saw, his back aching from lifting beams. It felt good. Honest work. Building instead of destroying. A man next to him, maybe 40 years old with kind eyes, introduced himself as Peter Walsh. "I knew James Hart," Peter said as they worked. "Good man. Quiet, but solid. He helped me figure my accounts when I couldn't make sense of the bank's numbers. Probably saved my farm." He paused, driving a nail with 3 precise strikes. "When he died, I thought it was just bad luck. Now I know better. We all do." "He'd be glad you're here," Cole said. "Helping his family. It's the least we can do, the very least." Peter looked at Cole directly. "You staying on? The town could use a man like you, someone who knows how to stand up to bullies." Cole had lost count of how many times someone had asked him that question in the past 2 days. Each time he gave a version of the same non-answer, and each time it felt more like a lie. "Haven't decided yet." "Well, think on it. This town's changing. Got a chance to be something good now, something honest, but change is hard. We'll need people who remember why we fought in the first place." By evening, the frame of a new cabin stood where the old one had burned. It was bigger than the original, 3 rooms instead of 2, with a proper loft for the girls and windows that would let in light. The men promised to return tomorrow and the day after, until it was finished proper. They left as the sun was setting, tired but satisfied, their voices carrying across the snow as they headed home. Cole made his way back to town as darkness fell. The streets were different now. People walked with their heads up instead of hunched against invisible threats. Lights burned in windows, and he could hear laughter coming from the saloon, the good kind of laughter that came from relief and celebration rather than desperation and drink. At June's store, he found the Hart family gathered around a table for supper. June had prepared a feast: roasted chicken, potatoes, bread that was still warm from the oven. Maggie and Nora ate like they'd been starving for a month, which maybe they had been. Evelyn picked at her food, but smiled at her daughter's appetite. "How are you feeling?" Cole asked, taking the seat June had set for him. "Better. Stronger." Evelyn's color was almost normal now, the fever finally gone. "June told me what's happening at the farm. What people are doing. They're building you a home, should be finished in a few days." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "I don't know how to repay that kind of kindness." "You don't repay it. June said firmly, setting down more food. You accept it with grace and pass it forward when you're able. That's how communities survive. We take care of each other. After supper, the girls went to bed early, exhausted from too many days of fear and too little sleep. June excused herself to handle some store business, leaving Cole and Evelyn alone at the table with cups of coffee between them. I need to thank you, Evelyn said quietly, for everything. For stopping when my daughters asked. For staying when you could have left. For fighting when you had every reason to walk away. I couldn't walk away, not from them. Cole stared into his coffee. They reminded me of someone. Someone I failed. Your son. Cole looked up, surprised. How did you... You told me, that first night, when I asked why you stopped being a marshal. You said you had a son, Thomas. That you weren't there when he died. Evelyn's voice was gentle. But you were there for my daughters. You kept them safe. You kept all of us safe. That's not failure, Cole. That's redemption. I don't deserve redemption. Maybe not. But you earned it anyway. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. I know what it's like to carry guilt. To think every bad thing that happens is somehow your fault. After James died, I kept thinking, if I'd been more careful with money, if I'd noticed something was wrong sooner, if I'd been stronger, maybe he wouldn't have felt so much pressure. Maybe he wouldn't have confronted Drayton. Maybe he'd still be alive. You couldn't have known. And you couldn't have stopped cholera. You couldn't have known your family would get sick while you were doing your job. We can't know the future, Cole. We can only do our best with what's in front of us. And you saved us. You gave my daughters a future. That has to count for something. Cole's throat was too tight to speak. He just held her hand and let her words sink into the places where he'd been punishing himself for 3 years. Will you stay? Evelyn asked. Not forever, if you don't want, but at least until we're settled. Until the cabin's built and Drayton's trial is done and things are stable. Cole thought about leaving, about saddling his horse and riding out at dawn like he'd done from a dozen towns before this one. He thought about the open road and the loneliness and the slow, grinding work of trying to outrun his own memories. And then he thought about Maggie's fierce courage and Nora's trust and this woman who'd held her family together through hell and was still offering kindness to a broken stranger. I'll stay, he said, at least until spring. Evelyn smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger, hopeful, like someone who could imagine a future again. Thank you. The next morning, Cole woke to the sound of hammering. The work crews had returned at dawn, and more had joined them. The cabin was taking shape faster than he'd thought possible, walls going up, a roof being framed, windows being fitted. Tom Hendricks was directing the work with the ease of someone who'd built a dozen structures in his lifetime. Cole pitched in, and this time Evelyn came too against his protests. She couldn't lift heavy beams, but she could hand tools to the workers, could measure and mark boards, could make herself useful. Maggie and Nora helped by bringing water and food to the workers, and slowly, the cabin transformed from a frame to a structure to something that looked like a home. 3 days later, it was finished. The cabin stood solid and square, with a stone chimney that drew properly and a door that hung straight. Inside, the women of the town had furnished it, a bed frame built by the blacksmith, mattresses stuffed with fresh straw, a table and chairs donated by families who had extras. Quilts covered the beds, curtains hung in the windows, and the shelves were stocked with preserves and flour and coffee. When Evelyn walked through the door for the first time, she stopped in the main room and just stood there, tears streaming down her face. Maggie and Nora ran from room to room, exclaiming over every detail: their own loft with real beds, a kitchen twice the size of the old one, windows that let in so much light it felt like sunshine lived inside the walls. It's beautiful, Evelyn whispered. It's more than I ever hoped for. It's what you deserve, June said firmly. She'd been part of every bit of the work, organizing donations and making sure nothing was forgotten. This is your home, yours and your daughters, and no one will ever take it from you again. That night, they had a celebration. The whole town seemed to show up, bringing food and music and joy that had been missing for too long. Someone had a fiddle, someone else a harmonica, and soon there was dancing in the new cabin's main room. Maggie and Nora danced with every man who asked, their laughter ringing like bells. Even Evelyn danced, her strength returning day by day. Cole stood outside, watching through the window. Deputy Hale found him there, 2 cups of whiskey in his hands. He offered one to Cole. "You did a good thing here," Hale said. "A great thing, really. The town did it. I just gave them a push." "Some pushes change everything." Hale sipped his drink. "Got word from Marshal Crowley today. Drayton's trial is set for next month in Cheyenne. He wants all of us to testify. You, Mrs. Hart, me, June, everyone who has evidence. Will you go?" "Have to. It's my job now." Hale looked at the badge on his chest. "The town council made it official. I'm the new sheriff. Can't quite believe it." "You'll do right by them. I know it." "Hope so." Hale paused. "They asked me to offer you something too. Town marshal position. Good salary, decent house that comes with the job. Chance to stay somewhere, be part of something." Cole had been expecting this. The town had been circling the offer for days, people dropping hints and suggestions. "I'm not sure I'm the staying type." "Maybe you weren't, but maybe you are now." Hale gestured toward the cabin, where Maggie had just spotted Cole through the window and was waving enthusiastically. "Those girls think you hung the moon. Mrs. Hart, too, though she's more subtle about it. And this town trusts you. That's rare, Cole. Trust like that doesn't come easy." Before Cole could answer, the door opened and Maggie came running out, Nora right behind her. "Mr. Cole, come dance. Mama says you have to." "I'm not much of a dancer," Cole protested, but the girls had already grabbed his hands and were pulling him inside. The crowd parted, laughing and clapping, and suddenly Cole was in the center of the room with 2 little girls teaching him steps he'd forgotten he ever knew. He was terrible at it, stepping on toes, going the wrong direction, but nobody cared. They just laughed and corrected him and kept the music going. And slowly, Cole felt something inside him unclench, some tight knot of grief and guilt beginning to loosen. When the song ended, breathless and dizzy, Cole found himself face to face with Evelyn. She was smiling at him with such warmth that his breath caught. "Thank you," she said simply, "for giving us this." "I didn't—" "Yes, you did. You gave us back our courage. You showed us we could fight and win. You proved we weren't alone." She took his hand, squeezed it gently. "I don't know what comes next for you, Cole Rourke, but I know my daughters and I will always be grateful you stopped that day in the snow." The party went late into the night. When it finally ended and people headed home through the darkness, Cole helped clean up while Maggie and Nora fell asleep on their new beds, exhausted and happy. Evelyn walked him to the door when he was ready to leave. "You're welcome here any time," she said, "for supper, for conversation, for whatever you need. This is your home too, in a way. You helped build it." "I appreciate that." Cole pulled on his coat, but found himself hesitating at the threshold. "Evelyn, about what the town's offering, the marshal position. You don't have to decide tonight or this week. Take your time, figure out what you want." She touched his arm lightly. "But know this, we want you to stay. Not because we need protection or because we owe you, but because you're part of us now, part of this family, this community, and good people are worth keeping around." Cole nodded, not trusting his voice, and stepped out into the cold night. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the new cabin glowed warm behind him. He made his way back to town slowly, his mind full of possibilities he'd stopped letting himself imagine years ago. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Cole took a room at the boarding house and spent his days helping wherever he was needed, repairing fences, mediating disputes, training Deputy Hale in the finer points of law enforcement. He had supper at the Hart cabin 3 or 4 times a week, and each time it felt more natural, more like coming home. Maggie and Nora started calling him Mr. Cole without the formality, just Cole, like he was family. They'd run to him with questions about horses or stories or arithmetic problems from their lessons. Evelyn would roll her eyes and apologize for them bothering him, but Cole never minded. He'd forgotten what it was like to be needed in simple, everyday ways. In early February, Marshal Crowley sent word that the trial was beginning. Cole, Evelyn, June, and Sheriff Hale made the journey to Cheyenne, leaving Maggie and Nora with Tom Hendrick's wife, who promised to spoil them rotten. The trial lasted 3 days. 3 days of testimony and evidence and watching Caleb Drayton's facade crumble piece by piece. The prosecutor was thorough and merciless. He presented James Hart's journal, showed the pattern of fraud and theft, brought forward witness after witness who'd lost everything to Drayton's schemes. When Evelyn testified about her husband's murder, about the attack on her home, about watching her daughters nearly freeze in the snow, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom except Drayton's. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Drayton to hang and also ordered all properties seized through fraudulent means to be returned to their rightful owners. Families who'd lost their land would get it back. Money stolen would be repaid from Drayton's considerable assets. The copper deposits under the Hart farm and the other properties legally belonged to the landowners, not to the man who'd tried to steal them. When the gavel fell, Evelyn reached for Cole's hand and held it tight. Justice had been slow, but it had arrived. They returned to salvation as heroes. The whole town turns out to welcome them back, to hear about the trial, to celebrate the final end of Drayton's reign. That night, the town council held a formal meeting in the new church, a different church than the one Drayton had funded, this one built with honest money and clean hands. Sheriff Hale stood at the front of the room and cleared his throat. We have some business to conduct. First, the question of the marshal position. We need someone to help keep order, to work alongside the sheriff's office, to represent this town with honor. He looked directly at Cole. Cole Rourke, this council unanimously votes to offer you the position of Town Marshal of Salvation, Wyoming. The salary is $40 a month plus room and board. The term is open-ended. We're hoping you'll accept. The room went quiet, everyone waiting. Cole stood slowly, feeling the weight of all those eyes on him. He thought about Thomas, about the family he'd lost, about 3 years of running from the past. He thought about Maggie grabbing his stirrup in the snow, about Evelyn facing down death with a fever burning through her, about a town finding its courage. I accept, he said, and the room erupted in cheers. Hale pinned a badge on Cole's coat, bright silver, newly made, with Town Marshal engraved across it. Cole touched it, feeling the weight of responsibility, of trust, of belonging. It felt right in a way he hadn't expected. After the meeting, people crowded around to congratulate him, to shake his hand, to tell him they were glad he was staying. June hugged him fiercely and told him not to make her regret pushing for this. Tom Hendricks clapped him on the back and said the town was lucky to have him. When the crowd finally cleared, Cole found Evelyn waiting with Maggie and Nora. The girls immediately ran to him, throwing their arms around his waist. You're staying, Nora said, her face pressed against his coat. You're really staying? I'm really staying, Cole confirmed, and the joy in their faces made every doubt he'd had vanish like morning fog. Maggie pulled back and looked up at him with serious eyes. Does this mean you'll be our marshal? Like, officially ours? Officially everyone's, but especially yours. Cole knelt down to their level. Remember how you asked me to be your dad just for a day? Well, I'm thinking maybe we could make it more permanent, if that's okay with you, and with your mother. Both girls turned to look at Evelyn, hope blazing in their faces. Evelyn's eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. Is that a proposal, Marshal Rourke? She asked softly. Cole stood and moved to face her, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been facing down Drayton's guns. I suppose it is. I know it's fast, and I know I'm not much of a prize, broken-down ex-lawman with more ghosts than good sense. But I love your daughters like they were my own. And I love you, Evelyn Hart. I love your strength and your courage and the way you've built a life out of ashes. He took her hands in his. I'm asking if you'll let me be part of that life. Let me help raise these girls, help build this home, help make a future worth living. Will you marry me? Evelyn didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, and Cole saw her taking his measure one last time, seeing past the scars and the shadows to whatever was underneath. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she smiled, wide and genuine and full of possibility. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. Maggie and Nora erupted in squeals of delight, dancing around them and hugging everyone within reach. The people still lingering in the church started cheering again, and suddenly Cole was being congratulated on 2 momentous decisions in one night. They married 3 weeks later in the new church, with the whole town in attendance. Maggie and Nora stood beside them, holding bouquets of early spring flowers. June cried through the entire ceremony. Sheriff Hale served as best man and made a toast at the reception that had everyone laughing and crying at once. Cole moved his few possessions into the cabin that night, and for the first time in 3 years, he slept in a real bed with a real family just down the hall. He woke in the morning to the sound of Maggie and Nora giggling in the kitchen, to the smell of coffee and bacon, to Evelyn humming softly as she worked. It was ordinary. It was perfect. Spring came slowly to Wyoming that year, but when it arrived, it brought new life with it. The copper deposits under the Heartland and the neighboring properties were leased to a mining company out of Denver, a reputable outfit that paid fair prices and hired local workers. The money from the leases helped rebuild what Drayton had destroyed and funded improvements to the town. A real school was built. The roads were graded proper. Families who'd been struggling found their footing again. Cole settled into his role as marshal with surprising ease. Most of his work was mundane, settling disputes over property lines, dealing with the occasional drunk, making sure traveling merchants weren't cheating the locals. But he was good at it, and more importantly, he cared about it. This was his town now. These were his people, and he'd be damned if he'd let anyone hurt them. Maggie and Nora thrived. They grew taller, healthier, happier. They did well in school and made friends easily. They learned to ride horses and helped with the farming and filled the cabin with noise and life. They called Cole Pa now, without hesitation or awkwardness. He'd never asked them to, never pushed. They just started doing it one day, and it felt right. Evelyn bloomed too. The fear that had lived in her eyes for so long faded, replaced by confidence and peace. She started a small business raising chickens and selling eggs, and her reputation for quality drew customers from 3 counties over. She and Cole would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, talking about everything and nothing, building a partnership that was more than romance. It was friendship, trust, and shared purpose. One evening in late May, as they sat watching the girls play in the yard, Evelyn rested her head on Cole's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Stopping that day? Staying?" Cole thought about the man he'd been, hollow and haunted, running from himself, convinced he deserved nothing but punishment and loneliness. He thought about the man he was now, still carrying scars, still missing his first family, but learning to live again, to love again, to believe he might deserve a second chance. "Not for a single moment," he said. "You saved me, Evelyn, you and the girls. I thought I was saving you, but it was the other way around." "We saved each other," she corrected gently. "That's how it works. That's how we survive." Maggie came running over, breathless and excited. "Pa, Nora says there's a fox den in the north pasture. Can we go see? Can we?" "After chores tomorrow," Cole said, "and only if you promise not to get too close. Foxes have teeth." "We promise," both girls chorused, then ran off to continue their game. Cole watched them go, these daughters who'd grabbed his stirrup in a blizzard and changed everything. He touched the badge on his chest, still shiny, still new. Marshal of Salvation. Husband. Father. Roles he'd never thought he'd have again. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of crimson and orange. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and the wind carried the scent of sage and new grass. It was a good land, Wyoming, hard and unforgiving, but beautiful in its way. A place where people could start over if they had the courage to try. Cole Rourke had found his courage in the eyes of 2 freezing children who'd believed he was worth saving. He'd found his purpose in a widow who'd refused to give up, and he'd found his home in a town that had learned to stand up for itself. He'd stopped running. And in stopping, he'd discovered that the peace he'd been chasing for 3 years had been waiting here all along, not in some distant place he could ride to, but in the choice to stay, to build, to love again, despite the risk of loss. The past would always be with him. Thomas would always be his son. His first family would always hold a piece of his heart. But hearts could hold more than one love, could heal without forgetting, could make room for new joy without betraying old grief. Evelyn squeezed his hand and Cole squeezed back, and together they watched the sun set on another day, in the life they'd built from ashes and courage and the stubborn refusal to let evil win. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect enough.